Help me hit 7,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you. I never thought a single night could change everything. But sometimes it's the quiet ones that cut the deepest. My name is Milo, and for the last 9 years, I've shared my life and my house with Daisy. When I met her, she was full of laughter, the kind that made a room feel lighter just because she existed. I was quieter, maybe a little clumsy socially, but I had my life together in the way that mattered. I worked hard, kept my promises, and tried to care in ways that counted. She said she loved that about me, said I was dependable, said I made her feel safe. For a long time, I believed it. The first few years were easy in a way that now feels almost too perfect to remember. We had inside jokes, late-night conversations about dreams too silly to share with anyone else, spontaneous road trips that felt like mini-adventures, even when it was just the two of us in my old hatchback driving along the coast. Everything seemed like it was heading somewhere beautiful, until it wasn't. I started noticing subtle shifts after year 5. Daisy didn't laugh at my jokes the way she used to, not because my humor had changed, but because her attention had shifted somewhere I couldn't reach. She'd come home, sit on the sofa scrolling endlessly through her phone, and I'd be left standing there like a shadow in my own home. At first, I told myself she was stressed, maybe tired from work, or dealing with something I couldn't see. I offered help, suggested dinner plans, tried to lighten the evenings. But every time I reached out, she shrank back just slightly, and that small distance grew into an invisible wall. One night, I tried to talk. I remember the way the living room felt, the faint hum of the heater, the muted glow of the lamp, the way her hair fell across her face while she scrolled. I sat down beside her and said softly, "I miss us." She didn't look up. She muttered, "I'm fine." And I realized then that fine wasn't the word. It was a shield, a soft, polite shield, but a shield nonetheless. That was the night something in me started to change. Not anger, not revenge, but recognition. Recognition that the life we had shared was no longer reciprocal, and that I was slowly disappearing from my own home. It got worse in ways that were almost laughably cruel if you didn't feel it. I'd make small gestures, bringing her coffee, leaving little notes, but they vanished like whispers in the wind. Hugs became quick pats on the shoulder. Kisses became cheek taps. The small acts of intimacy that used to knit us together dissolved. I tried to rationalize, thinking maybe this was temporary, a phase, but deep down I knew. She thought she could laugh at me, brush past me, dismiss me, and I'd keep functioning as if nothing had happened. She was wrong. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening that seemed unremarkable, until every detail engraved itself into my memory. I'd set up a small surprise. Candles on the table, her favorite playlist low in the background. A simple dinner for two. I wanted to remind her, and maybe myself, that the little things still mattered. She walked in, smiled faintly, and said something that I'll never forget. "Do you really think this changes anything?" The casual dismissal, as if she had rehearsed it, as if she had already decided the game, shattered something in me that had been bending, but never breaking. I remember the silence after that. Not a quiet filled with warmth, but a cold absence. She didn't touch her plate. I didn't eat mine. The lights of the room reflected off the polished table, yet nothing shone. I realized then that this wasn't just about a single moment. It was about years of being underestimated, overlooked, and laughed at behind a polite smile. I had been bending, accommodating, giving more than was ever returned, believing in reciprocity that had long since vanished. Milo me had a choice. I could shrink further into the corner of my own life, continue to endure, continue to hope for sparks that would never ignite again. Or I could do something I hadn't dared before, reclaim the space that was mine, the very house that she occupied so casually, thinking that laughter could erase accountability, would remind her, in the quietest, most resolute way, that I existed, and that my patience had limits. I started small in ways she wouldn't expect. I stopped bending around her moods. I stopped anticipating her desires before she expressed them. I took time for myself, quiet walks in the park, long showers where I let the water run like a metaphor for washing away frustration. Evenings spent rereading books I had loved long before we met. Every action was subtle, invisible almost, but it added up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't plotting. I was simply shifting the gravity of my own world back to myself. And that shift, it was liberating. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The air in the house felt different, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for me to decide that I wouldn't be invisible anymore. Daisy was already up, scrolling through her phone at the kitchen counter, the same habitual look of distracted amusement on her face. I poured myself coffee, watching her without saying a word. For a moment, she noticed my silence and looked up, curious, maybe even a little unsettled. "I'm going to take a walk," I said casually. No anger, no accusation, just a statement. And for the first time in a long time, I felt her uncertainty. That small flicker in her eyes. It wasn't fear exactly, but acknowledgement. She realized, finally, that I had been present, loyal, patient, and kind, and that patience had a limit. I walked out the front door and breathed deeply, letting the morning air fill every corner of tension inside me. Over the next week, I maintained this new rhythm. I didn't bend, I didn't argue, I didn't apologize for existing. Every small act of autonomy, making plans without asking, enjoying meals alone, listening to music she didn't care for, was a quiet declaration. And each day, I noticed the subtle change in the energy between us. Daisy no longer laughed at my discomfort. She no longer dismissed me with a wave or a soft smile. There was tension now, a recognition that the house wasn't just hers to occupy, and that my presence mattered in ways she could no longer ignore. It all came to a head one evening when she tried to brush past me in the hallway with a careless joke, expecting the old Milo who would chuckle and let her word cut through. I didn't react. I just looked at her, quietly, firmly. "Daisy," I said, "I don't laugh at things that dismiss me." My voice was calm, measured, not raised, but it carried the weight of years she had overlooked. Her eyes widened. For the first time, she saw the shift. Not in anger, not in dramatics, but in the quiet dignity of someone reclaiming their own worth. That night, she left the house briefly, claiming to meet a friend. I stayed behind, sitting at the kitchen table with the soft hum of the refrigerator, thinking about all the moments I had given away, my attention, my loyalty, my patience, and I realized something profound. This house, this life, this space I had co-created, didn't belong to someone who didn't value it. It belonged to me, and for the first time in years, I felt completely and unapologetically at home within myself. Daisy returned later that evening, and there was no apology, no dramatic confrontation. She simply walked in and paused, scanning the room with a quiet awareness. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The silence itself was the message. Over time, her demeanor shifted. The laughter that had once been used as a weapon, as a shield, faded when she realized that the Milo she had underestimated was no longer bending. She tried, subtly, to reestablish the old rhythm, but it was too late. I had changed, and I was no longer the man who would tolerate being dismissed in his own home. Weeks passed, and our interactions became transactional, polite, but devoid of the intimacy that had defined our early years. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. I no longer needed her validation to feel worthy. I no longer needed her laughter to feel seen. And though it stung to acknowledge that the love we had shared had quietly eroded over time, I understood that this was the natural consequence of years of neglect. She had thought she could mock me, diminish me, and still benefit from my presence. She was wrong. One evening, as I prepared dinner for myself, Daisy approached cautiously. There was a tentative softness in her voice, an almost imperceptible vulnerability. "Milo," she said. "I didn't realize." She trailed off, and I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. My own actions, my steadfast presence in the face of her disregard, had spoken louder than any words I could offer. I smiled faintly, a gesture that was neither victory nor revenge, but acknowledgement. I had endured, I had observed, and I had emerged intact. That was enough. Looking back, I can see the pattern now, the quiet lessons embedded in every overlooked moment, every dismissed effort, every laugh she had thrown my way as if it cost nothing. Life is filled with people who underestimate your patience, who assume kindness is weakness. But patience is power. Presence is power. And sometimes, the most profound lessons are taught not through confrontation, but through steadfast calm, through quiet reclamation of what is rightfully yours. Milo, that's me. A man who learned that laughter at your expense, even in a home you share, is not harmless. It's corrosive. It's quiet destruction. And the only way to stop it is to stop tolerating it. I've learned that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes strength is the silence after you stand up, the quiet dominance of a life lived without apology, the simple act of being fully, unapologetically yourself. And as for Daisy, she learned too. She learned that a home shared with someone who respects themselves is not a playground for mockery. That love, trust, and respect are not endless resources to exploit. That boundaries, once established, are not suggestions, they are rules. And I learned that reclaiming yourself, even in small, subtle steps, is the most powerful act of all. Because at the end of the day, you can't let someone diminish your presence without consequence. You can't let someone laugh at your worth while you bend to accommodate them. And if you do, you're not living, you're existing in someone else's shadow. I chose to step out of that shadow, one deliberate, unshakable step at a time. And that choice, it changed everything.